So even though I haven't been getting much done on the layout itself, I did want to show some of the things I have been working on, things I can do more easily upstairs while looking after my little one. So one of the things is I've actually done a fair amount of development and refinement on the track plan since I last kind of showed this. One of the things is I think I've kind of got a better plan as to what this is going to represent and how it's going to be laid out. So one of the first things is that the upper deck, the main part of the layout, is going to be Southern Ontario. It's going to be no one place in particular. It's actually going to be fictional locations, but I'm trying to go for an overall feel, an overall sense of place that would seem like Southern Ontario. And as I'll go over, there's some inspiration from some actual places. So having a look at the lower layer here, and we'll go over this in a little bit more detail first because there's less to talk about. This is a little bit more of kind of a moon shot. Right now I'm going to just keep it to the single deck, but I've kind of started to think about what I could do for a second layer, and it really lets me accomplish everything I would want to in the space I provided. Presuming I can clear out enough boxes and everything to make the second layer possible. So we've got the helix that would come down here, and then we've got two subdivisions that would branch off of it. This middle one here that goes into around the center of the basement is going to be Northern Ontario subdivision, and it's going to have a copper mine, and a lumber mill, and possibly some kind of a factory as industries. And it's also going to kind of be my opportunity to show off some of the kind of the Canadian Shield type scenery, very rocky terrain with rock cuts, and you know, the Northern Ontario forest, and kind of a lot of what people think of like cottage country, and even farther north from that. So that's certainly some scenery I'd really like to have on my layout. It's a type of terrain that I find very beautiful, and I'm glad I was able to find a way to work that in. Plus, it gives some interesting industries. There is copper condensate that comes from Northern Ontario, and although a lot of the lumber industry has slowed down compared to what it used to be, there is still some lumber and other industries up there as well I can add. So this outside part here that goes around the room, this is going to be a Northern Alberta subdivision, which is, you know, a little bit more relevant to my current experience. So this will have some more of like the kind of oil industry things, a siding to unload pipe loads, some oil transload, as well as possibly some petroleum coke loading, which is kind of very similar to coal. It would be open hoppers. Could be a really fun thing to model. And then there's also sulfur loads, liquefied sulfur that would come off of this branch. So lots of industries, lots of opportunities to model things that probably I know the best. So it's something that I'd really like to include. This area up here, this yard that's probably the most developed out of this level, is actually a fairly highly compressed, but a representation of the rail yard in Lac La Biche as it would have been probably around the 1940s or 50s. So it's somewhat kind of historic. It's not modern like the rest of the layout. I would still operate this section as if it were modern, but it is kind of, it's meant as more of a historic representation. Things like this track here are gone, and that one. This is where the station used to be. It's gone now to two grain elevators, which are also gone, water tower and coaling tower, which are, all of that's gone, and the engine house has been replaced with a modern one that's slightly different than what's shown here. So all in all, I'd really like to build this. It is also worth noting, if anybody's paying attention, that this Y here, and actually this part here where the engine shed is, would actually be some kind of a drop leaf or lift up section or removable piece, because this is the walkway. So that would be kind of a temporary piece or something that's just put in place on special occasions, because especially at the lower deck level, we'd be running into it with our wastes, so it's not something that could stay permanently attached, unfortunately. So having a look at the upper level, which as I mentioned earlier is going to be Southern Ontario, I've kind of cleaned up a few things, gotten a few more ideas as to exactly how I'm going to make this work. I've still got a few things to figure out and decide what I'm going to put where. So we'll just kind of work our way around. So the general idea is going to be that it can be run as a continual loop, but for operation purposes, it's basically going to start here. This is going to be Oakwood Yard, which is going to be on the eastern side of the subdivision. This track here would, in theory, go off to Buffalo, New York. This Y will, which once again in the path, so it's going to have to be some kind of a drop leaf. This part I'll probably leave affixed and then just have this part drop. But that would allow me to be able to turn trains in operation, both allowing for passenger trains to be turned as well as kind of give that effect if I need to turn a train that would be heading towards the States or coming from the States. So then we go around Oakwood Yard. So this is going to be a residential scene back here, kind of facing onto the yard. So we're going to have a street and some houses. I've just kind of blocked in some things, kind of figuring out how many lots I can fit. This is roughly supposed to represent the lots, not the houses. They'd be quite big, especially if you compared to the station. And then moving along, this is actually wrong. I need to correct this, because at the moment I've actually reconfigured this so the delivery track for the fuel comes in on this side here. It was the only way I could make it work. I think I had that in my earlier video. I was actually causing derailments around here. It was too sharp. So that was my compromise, and really isn't that much of a compromise. It actually gives me some space here to put like a crew office or something like that, and gets that up front and center. Moving along here, it looks like my current plan is to do a backdrop building. So use that station that I showed earlier, or well, it's actually not sold as a station, but I'm going to use it as a station, and make it wider and only do it a partial depth. If I do that, it looks like I should get 3 passenger tracks in, which is excellent. It exceeds my expectations. This is a very deep part of the table, so accessibility is going to be a bit of a challenge there, but we'll see how that works in the long run. This area right here is one of the areas that I don't really have a good plan for. This is going to be some kind of, either engineering department or maintenance of way tracks, possibly a small transloader like a team track. I'm not entirely sure. I've got this switch coming off the ladder, which would allow me to get back here. I just haven't come up with a solid plan as to what exactly I want to do with it. Coming around to Oakwood Industrial, that's pretty much unchanged. We're going to have a bridge here over a river. This is the next area that's kind of undefined. It's very, very deep, so I'm not going to have easy access to the back. This will eventually be the cap of where the helix goes. But it's also a good opportunity to have a large industry. So not entirely sure what I want to put there. I do have some ideas in mind, possibly something like an auto plant, or some kind of a complex, that's quite big. I do have some buildings for a paper mill. I think that's going to go somewhere else though, which I'll get to in just a minute. So looping around here, so this is a little confusing on this diagram, but this track here basically goes over top. These ones here go underneath. So these 2 long ones would be staging for trains coming actually east from the US. So they would come east into Oakwood Yard over here, or exit to the States that way. And then, yeah, this line here, this one actually would be the one that heads into the helix. So following this round, so this would go over top of the track here, and then come across the walkway, underneath the stairs. And then I'm thinking a small industrial yard here. It's not overly large, but I think it should be just kind of functional enough. So this is what we would call Sylvan Industrial. So this is going to be the town of Sylvan here, the Sylvan Station. This is these modules I've shown in a number of videos. So here we'd have, I'm thinking we're going to have, I'm not 100% on in what order. This is going to be like a car parts plant, so boxcars in, boxcars out kind of thing. Possibly like a scrap dealer over on this side. I haven't exactly decided. I might just leave it open as just kind of some headroom for this industry here. This I'm going to do a lumber yard, so that'll take flat car loads of lumber. And then this one here, I'm thinking might be a paper mill. I haven't entirely decided. My original plan was actually put the paper mill over here because it can be quite a large complex with some interesting switching. If I do it over here, it'll basically, they will use this industrial yard and then just have to come across the main to drop off cars here. Not ideal, so I might actually turn that into a different industry. We'll see how it works. So coming around, we've got a station here, and we've got a siding here that's going to go off into another area I've got for a larger industry. Once again, I don't have a firm set thing in mind that this is going to be. Going back, this in here is all city, of course. That's already under construction. So yeah, not quite sure what I'm going to put there, but yeah, I'll figure that out. And then we're going to come across here. This is going to be the lift bridge. And then it comes down, and this is going to be the port of Attawandan. So just in case anybody's wondering, with the exception of Oakwood, which, yeah, that's a different story, but Sylvan and Attawandan are actually named after two of the scout camps that I used to frequent in southern Ontario. So places I'm fond of, and close to the geographical areas where I'm setting these as well. So this is the port of Attawandan. It's actually going to be loosely based on Goderich, Ontario. So we're going to have some grain elevators. I'm thinking currently that the front edge here is going to be a harbor, where the lake freighters would be. Probably not actually going to see the lake freighters. It's probably just basically going to be like an inch of water and then like the corrugated steel wall. But yeah, grain elevator. And then the other interesting industry that I thought would be a really nice kind of local touch is a salt mine. There is a large salt mine in Goderich. If I'm not mistaken, it is Sifdo Salt. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. But yeah, salt mine's a very interesting thing. They take a lot of loads of covered hoppers. I'm not sure if Goderich per se does a lot, but table salt and stuff like that can be shipped by boxcars, so that's another type of load that could come out of there. And then I've got a passenger station here. That's the other reason for the Y, is that so I can bring passenger trains around this way and then run them up here to the Y to turn them around to head back east. Most terminal facilities like this would have either a Y or turntable or some way of being able to turn things. So this kind of does double duty as both east of Oakwoods and also west of the port of Attawandan. But I think that'll work nicely. It gives me the operation I want anyway. I also do have I've got a switch currently in here for possible another industry. I don't want to make it too cluttered in here. A couple of industries right here I think's enough. We'll see how it works as the track plan develops. As it stands, I really only have, so like this part here of the benchwork assembled, and then this part here of the outside. So all of this area, all of this side of the basement is all kind of up in the air still and subject to change. As you can see, there's definitely some wide open gaps as to how the track would work. But I think I'm getting to a good plan of how I can make things fit and how I can make things operate. It was a real concern without having space for a turntable, which is always a little problematic as to how I could actually turn the trains and be able to run it more like a point-to-point. I think having this Y in here accomplishes it. The only problem is that it requires a drop leaf section, which is not ideal, because we're going to have a bridge here, and a drop leaf section here, which is all going to kind of chop up the space. And the Y, an engine house for MacLeod would be here on the lower level, if that was in place. So yeah, we'll see how that all works. It might not, because I can't exactly be not able to move around the basement. One of the other things I wanted to show is part of what's going to end up being the control system for the layout. So I've been kind of debating for a long time exactly how I wanted to do this, and I'm abundantly aware that there's Program Panel Pro, which is all part of JMRI, and I'm sure there's other programs out there that can do it, but I kind of wanted to do something myself. I have some training in programming, I have some experience in programming. It's something that I quite enjoy doing. So this is my system for inventory, and it'll eventually evolve into control and switch lists and things like that, and I call it MIDAS, Model Railroad Inventory Database and Simulator. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is the main dashboard. There is a fast clock function that I programmed in. A little clunky right now, have some improvements to make on it. Have some graphs that I can have just some kind of overall view, and we'll get into the inventory here in just a second. So this was one of the first things I wanted to do. This whole project's been kind of a case study and scope creep. So it's gotten quite involved and is going to get even more involved as the time goes on. But one of the very first things I wanted to do was have some way of keeping track of what I had. This will also be necessary when I get into doing switch lists and doing the more simulator side of things, figuring out load generation and things of that nature. I'm going to need to know car numbers and locomotive numbers to assemble these trains. So database is all part of that. Also helps me stay a little bit organized. So this is, kind of it in a nutshell. Gives me some basic information. I've got a little information up here. Can edit and delete, add equipment. It's not too complicated, hopefully fairly intuitive, at least for myself. It gives me an easy way of organizing my collection. I will also talk that, so this is currently the way that it looks, and I've kind of done some tweaking to get it to look like this. This was actually the original design of it. There are still a few functions I haven't quite transferred over. My original thought was to make it look kind of like an old mainframe green screen type system, which is a lot of what the railroads actually use. It's a lot of old systems that run through a terminal on Windows, but a lot of kind of very text-based green screen type content. However, I didn't really find it worked out all that well. It kind of looks like it, but also just kind of looks ugly. So since I didn't really like the way that this design turned out, this is what I ended up going with. So I've got cars, Also, so these are the railways, so all the reporting marks and everything like that can be assigned to things. The maps is currently the part I'm working on. You can see there's some broken links here. I'm working on layering things, and this would kind of give you the block diagram view where signals are and stuff like that. And the idea is here is eventually you're going to be able to click, get information now, and you'll be able to actually throw dispatch controlled switches and stuff from this interface. Reports, there isn't anything yet. Car location's probably going to be one of the first ones I do, so I can actually track where stuff is. Simulator, so this is where I currently have my fast clock settings. So just got some preset multipliers. You can set the start time, hit start clock, opens a second large window, which actually kind of does the calculations. Now if we go back here, we can go to the dashboard and we can see that this is running, and it should actually update and function as a fast clock. I've also been playing around with actually using that fast clock and displaying it on a 7-segment display so that I can actually have some physical clocks around the layout. And I even have some ideas of how to maybe get it to work for analog clock face as well, which might be a little bit interesting. A little bit kind of more old-timey style, but something I'd like to tackle anyway. Well, I hope you enjoyed this update of my layout. Hopefully there will be much more to come soon. I'm hoping to make a lot of progress on this winter. If you'd like to see more, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. You can also follow me on both Instagram and Twitter. And I'll post a little bit more about this stuff on my website, tinkeringgeek.com. And until next time, keep tinkering.